Business has always been about turning a profit, making money. But can it stand for something more? Something beyond dollars and cents? We think so. We think that today, business has a higher calling, a purpose to be fair and just, to do right by their workers, customers, communities, and the environment. And it turns out companies successful doing that also do better for their bottom line. When you see the Just Capital seal, it means this company is a force for good. Visit justcapital.com to learn more.
And good afternoon. We're doing it live right here. Weekday afternoons at 4 o'clock. We get right down to business right here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money, live on the air on 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide, KBC.com, and you're on demand. Mottek On Money podcast, KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, all your favorite podcast platforms. Stay tuned for Randy Wang of the 790 KBC News Blitz right after this. In the 5 o'clock hour, stocks ending lower today, kicking off the new week. Investors bracing for another busy week of economic reports following all of the big news on earnings lately that propelled the market to record highs on Friday. We're looking for some more catalysts now to take the market even higher following a boost from NVIDIA last week, which knocked it out of the park and hit all-time highs, bringing the rest of the market along with it. The Dow coming in for a closing loss today of 62 points, coming off an all-time high. The S&P 500 slipping 19 from its record high achieved on Friday. And the NASDAQ composite dipping 20 points. It's been flirting with record highs, but not quite. The Dow ended last week up 1.3%. The NASDAQ rose 1.4% for the week, and the S&P 500 advanced 1.7% for the week. We did see bond yields ease a bit today. The yield on the 10-year note now 4.28%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, which did tick higher over the past week. We're watching what's happening with the latest news on the economy. We'll be getting a new reading on inflation later this week. We did get a new home sales report today showing that sales did tick up in January. Appearances by several Fed speakers also will be happening during the course of the week. The Federal Trade Commission today sued to block the merger of grocery store giant Kroger and Albertsons. Kroger, the parent company of Ralph's here in Southern California, and Albertsons, saying the deal would stifle competition, raise grocery prices, and harm workers and product quality. Kroger shares dropped 2% on that news. Albertsons stock actually rose today by 0.6%. Looked like shares of Domino's Pizza moved higher today, up nearly 6%. After that company top profit expectations for its latest quarter, boosted by strength in both delivery and carry-out sales. Looks like Domino's Pizza managed to raise some dough today, up nearly 6% at the close. And shares of Berkshire Hathaway Class A shares, the most expensive on the New York Stock Exchange, pulling back 2% today. Over the weekend, the company reported operating earnings after taxes rose 28% to $8.5 billion in the fourth quarter. That's billionaire investor Warren Buffett's company. Berkshire's chair and CEO also releasing his annual letter to shareholders. Berkshire Hathaway shares pulling back nearly 2% today. Well, we did see the market closed sharply higher on Friday, hitting record highs. We came off those record highs here today. Bitcoin, by the way, that's what I wanted to mention. You're nearly 55,000 here, 54,499 at last look, up about $20 here at the moment. Crypto's coming to life again lately. Now, coming up later this hour, I'll be speaking to one of the candidates in the California U.S. Senate race. Eric Early will be joining me live later this hour. And can you believe it? U.S. commercial real estate foreclosures up 97% compared to a year ago of 17% just last month. Is the bottom in commercial real estate in Los Angeles? I'll put that question and get the latest here with Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Director of the Real Deal commercial real estate news site. But first, to kick off the new week on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works now, joining us live, the one and only Ben Stein. Yep, for our occasional Frank and Stein conversation here to kick off the new week. Ben Stein, financial and political commentator, attorney, author, game show host of Win Ben Stein's Money. Actor, too, world famous for playing the economics professor, basically himself, in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, in one of the most famous scenes in American cinematography. Ben Stein, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon, sir.
Always a pleasure, Frank. Always a pleasure.
We'll take it from the top here, sir, with the markets at record highs. How's Ben Stein feeling nowadays?
Well, Ben Stein feels as if we have no end to the inflation. The inflation is a cruel tax on every American family, just about. And that we're still feeling the effects of a gigantic overprinting of money during the pandemic to plan, and a good plan was to rescue the economy from any possibility of a second Great Recession. Great Depression. But we are going to get the effects of a huge inflation of the money supply in huge inflation of prices. I don't see any end to that until prices get so high that against their will, consumers are forced to cut back, and that ripples through the economy in terms of lower demand and therefore lower prices.
On there live with the one and only Ben Stein. If you can put your political analysis hat on as well as your legal hat. We're watching President Trump defeating Nikki Haley in the South Carolina Republican primary over the weekend. Looks like we're in for a rematch here of President Trump and President Biden here at the moment. And also on the legal front, we see President Trump appealing that $454 million judgment in the New York civil fraud case. Sir, give us your reaction to these headlines here today.
I'm very upset about the way the Democrats and the left wing are generally using the legal process to defeat Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution, which specify how the leadership of the country is to be created through elections, and how it does not say anything about it being created through litigation. What we've seen recently is that if you have a very, very aggressive, powerful set of prosecutors and a endless supply of grand jury members who will indict just about anything. There's an old saying in Washington, my hometown, that a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. And I don't see any possibility that the Democrats are going to be discouraged from using the grand jury pool and prosecutorial discretion to wrap up the fists and strength of President Trump or anyone they don't like to ruin those people's lives. And I will back up and say, as you well know, we've discussed it a great many times, although never enough, was a lawyer and a speechwriter for President Nixon. And I saw how they just took it out of him, out of his soul and his energy and his ambition by endlessly litigating against him, prosecuting him for various made-up things that never happened, and that they're doing the same to Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump's great weakness is money. It's a great weakness for all of us. And if you sue enough, take enough money away from someone, or even threaten to take enough money away from someone, that person's morale is going to be greatly weakened. His or her energy and enthusiasm about fighting for what are legitimately his or her rights going to be considerably diminished, and it's going to be an endless Chinese, no offense to our Chinese friends, Chinese water torture in which the drip, the gushing, the Niagara Falls of litigation falling upon Mr. Trump are just going to wear him down. And if you threaten to take away his money, and if you threaten to take away his money in a big way, you're really going to hurt him and weaken his ability to campaign. And if he were to win, weaken his ability to govern. I think something's really wrong with the legal system now.
On the air live with Ben Stein for our Frank and Stein conversation live here on 790 KBC. What about the Supreme Court on its decision ultimately to hear President Trump's immunity case? I did see something written up in Newsweek, I guess over the weekend. A former federal prosecutor wrote that the Supreme Court is taking a long time to decide whether to take the case, a sign that it's possibly about to refuse President Trump's petition on presidential immunity. What do you expect there, sir?
I'm very worried about that. The Supreme Court is reluctant to get into what they call the thicket of political controversy in legal matters, and with good reason. But if they don't give Mr. Trump presidential immunity, if they allow any prosecutor in any one of the thousands of courts across this country, state or federal, to go after him, to tie him down, to have him all bound up and gagged and to take away his money. They are going to be able to determine the results of any future elections of any kind, presidential, congressional, state, local. We are now entering a very frightening new phase of American governance in which prosecutors and grand juries are going to be the final deciders of who wins and loses in American politics, not what the Constitution intended. And I cannot imagine how Madison or Jefferson or Washington or Franklin or any of the original founding fathers, not necessarily Franklin, would feel about this. I think the Constitution is being subverted in a really wicked and frightening way.
Right, and the legal barrage continues against former President Trump, and now the Manhattan DA Bragg requesting a judge impose a gag order on President Trump during the so-called hush money case. What about that one?
Outrageous. Mr. Bragg, I'm sure, has many good qualities and is a fine man to his friends and family, but this is going to make him a character right out of 1984, the scary, terrifying George Orwell novel about a dystopian future. He is going to be, Mr. Bragg and people like him are going to be in a position to dominate the way the country is run and to take away all really governing power from the 150 plus million voters and arrogate it to themselves. Not what the framers intended.
We should remind our audience that you were very close to the Nixon White House as a speechwriter back in those days. Can you have ever imagined a situation where a former president faced these kind of legal challenges?
I would not have been able to imagine it, but I think if you had brought it up to me in a conversation at that time, even though it was far in the future, we might have been able to hypothesize that it could happen. I do remember very vividly sitting in my wonderful office in the White House, writing about, is there any limit to prosecutorial discretion? Is there any limit to what prosecutors can do to a president to jam his gears or her gears and make it impossible for him or her to govern? And I remember thinking to myself, there's no limit. And if we have an out of control, angry, villainous prosecutor, he or she is going to be able to make the country his or her own personal political fief, and that's like a province. And I remember thinking, gosh, if you really follow this path all the way to its end, you come up with 1984 or some other scary future dictatorship, and I think that's what's happened. The Constitution is rapidly being run down.
On there live with Ben Stein, turning to geopolitics. Ben Stein is zooming out to the Middle East and what's happening there with the U.S. Striking targets against the Houthis and so forth, and of course the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas and all kinds of crazy protests here as well as elsewhere. Ben Stein, give us your thoughts about what's happening on the Middle East front.
Let's make it real clear cut. When we say Houthis, we really mean Iran. The Houthis are just a side pocket, so to speak, of Iran. When Iran wants to attack the people it hates, namely America and the West, and also Japan, they use the Houthis to go do it. The Houthis are not a meaningful independent entity. They are a shadow group, but very well-armed shadow group of the Iran national, whatever they call themselves, the Iran Presidential Guard or whatever they're called. And when we say Houthi in the news, don't think Houthi. Don't think some guy you've never heard of. Think of a big, giant country rolling in oil money, recently released by President Biden to them, able to get all the weapons it wants, very closely tied in with North Korea, China, and what I still think of as the Soviet Union, but what's really Russia. And you have a scary story there. We have an alliance of people who hate democracy, hate the free world, hate freedom in general, hate law, and they are our enemies, and they are very well armed, determined, and don't mind dying.
On the Air Live with Ben Stein. And what about Russia and Ukraine and the debate underway now in Washington, and certainly a big part of the political discussion, whether the U.S. should continue to support Ukraine as it's been against the Russian invasion. Give us your thoughts on that front.
Very, very important question, Frank, and I'm so glad you asked it. The Ukrainians have done such brave, incredibly creative, heroic work fighting for freedom in that part of Europe and in the whole world. And we have been a big part of helping them carry on that fight. If we don't keep doing that, if we let the Russians roll over Ukraine, rape their women, kill them by burying them alive after slitting their throats, it's going to be a nightmare. It's bad. Russia under Mr. Putin is not a lawful state the way we understand that. It's a vehicle for aggression and cruelty, and there was never any point in this war in the first place. What does Russia get out of it? You think about it, they've had tremendous losses in their army, tremendous, unbelievable, because the Ukrainians are such good warriors. What has it gotten the Russians? What do they get out of it? There's nothing they get out of it, just a lot of grieving mothers and fathers. It's a sign of extremely poor statesmanship on the part of the Russian political leadership, and it breaks.
On the Air Live with Ben Stein. Ben, thank you very, very much for taking the call here on Mottek on Money on 790 KABC. Friends, people like you and me have our ear to the ground on all things business. We like to be informed and well prepared. And as important as finance is, I want you to have a plan in case you're hit by someone not paying attention to the road. Yep, you heard me. Thinking ahead serves us well. And even still, we can get caught off guard as people are so focused on their destination that they might not have a plan in case they're in an accident. That's not their fault. And that's why I encourage you to put my friend Attorney Clark Fielding's number in your phone. That number is 833-88-SHARK. So if you're in an accident, you'll be ready with your strategy to make Clark Fielding your very first call. Fielding Law aims for the highest possible settlements, considering you might need long-term care, rehab, compensation for lost wages, and any ongoing physical or emotional pain. So if you're hurt in any kind of accident, call for a free consultation with Fielding Law. You can trust them. They're honest, respected, and your strategy in case you get into that unexpected accident. Motorcycle, truck, pedestrian, scooter, hit and run, boating, or bike accidents, you name it, 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK. Or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Good afternoon. We're doing it live. The 4 o'clock hour here, Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Right now, we want to bring to your attention, Dr. Jordan Peterson. 790 KABC welcomes Dr. Jordan Peterson to the YouTube Theater coming up on May 15th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. And right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-790-5222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC, kicking off the new week with a pullback from the record highs we achieved on Friday. The Dow coming in for a closing loss of 62 points at 39,069. It was a seesaw session with the Dow flirting with the new all-time highs. The S&P 500 down 19 at 5,069, and the NASDAQ pulled back 20 at 15,596. The yield in the 10-year note has eased to 4.28%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates. Bitcoin is on a tear, moving up about 100 now at 54,568. About 10,000 or so below its all-time high. Ethereum down $10 at 3,175, and Doge at 9 cents. President Biden inviting the top 4 congressional leaders to the White House tomorrow, aiming to avoid a partial federal government shutdown. Yep, this is happening again. That could possibly start this weekend if lawmakers can't approve additional funding by Friday's midnight deadline. Biden also pushing House lawmakers to move forward on a $95 billion foreign aid package, as we just discussed with Ben Stein, for Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and humanitarian aid that the Senate passed earlier this month. Did you hear about this? Some AT&T customers are not satisfied with the $5 credit the company's offering for its massive service disruption last week, saying $5 is no longer enough to buy almost anything these days and is not adequate compensation for the inconvenience caused by that massive outage. MarketWatch reporting consumers expressing disappointment with AT&T's credit today, saying, for instance, that $5 could only buy 5/6 of a box of Thin Mints, according to one user on X, formerly known as Twitter, and joking that they would get a cup of ice or an 8-ounce carton of milk. Some said the company wasn't doing enough for its longtime customers. And now the latest news for you right here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KABC. Good afternoon. We're doing it live right here in the 4 o'clock hour. Live on the air, 790 KABC, streaming live for you online worldwide at KABC.com. And the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, all your favorite podcast platforms. Can you believe it? A week from tomorrow, the California primary will be happening. Among the contests, you'll be deciding the race for U.S. Senate here in California, the seat previously occupied by longtime Senator Dianne Feinstein, who passed away last year. Joining us live, one of the candidates vying for that seat. With us now, attorney Eric Early, Republican candidate for the California U.S. Senate. Eric Early, thank you very much for coming to the line here. Take it from the top, sir, and tell us why you should be the next U.S. Senator here in California.
Well, first of all, always great being with you, Frank.
Listen,
I'm the strongest candidate in this race. All Republicans are being led down the garden path if they vote for Steve Garvey. They're going to be in for a very, very rude awakening if he ends up in the top two. And Adam Schiff is spending millions to get Garvey to end up as his running mate in the top two for obvious reasons. When California's Republicans really start getting to know who Steve Garvey is and what he's capable of, it's not a pretty picture. So, listen, I am the fighter in this race. I'm getting support from all around the state, California's grassroots, and I fight for what I call the I's: immigration, inflation, indoctrination, incarceration, Israel. Immigration, we've got to stop the invasion. We've got to bring back President Trump's policies for stopping that invasion, and if need be, we need to be prepared to send the military to stop what's going on down there. Inflation, I'm a huge supporter of our fossil fuel industry. You bring down the price of a barrel of oil, you start bringing down the cost of living across the board. Indoctrination, what's going on in the schools with our kids, with this sexual fluidity stuff, teaching kids, youngest kids, doesn't matter if you're born a boy or girl, you could be anything you want to be. Teaching kids that America's an oppressor nation, an occupier, a colonizer. It's got to be stopped. Incarceration, real basic. Criminals need to know that they're going to be punished again for their crimes. And Israel, we've got to stand with Israel against this death cult over there, Hamas and their benefactors, Iran. And we cannot have these appeasers like the Bidens and his whole group trying to tell Israel what to do. They need to do what they set out to do, which is to destroy Hamas. So those are my positions in a nutshell. And but I would warn all Republicans: don't be fooled. You haven't seen this guy Garvey in action. He is not ready for prime time. He's going to be knocked around the horn, as they say in baseball, if it's just him versus Schiff in the top two.
On the air live with Eric Early, Republican candidate for the California U.S. Senate seat, with the election coming up on March 5th. And unfortunately, voters so far have been denied seeing you in these debates. I know you were challenging how these things came together with just, 3 or 4 people up there. The field is much larger. What is your message to the field? Adam Schiff appears to be the front runner at this point. If you were up there, what would your message be at this point?
Listen, Frank, there are over 25 candidates in this race. Even the people who were running those debates polled me in 5th position, and they decided to only allow the top 4 on there. And the reason is they're far left-leaning groups that controlled who got on those debate stages, and they don't want to hear my voice up there. And if I'd been up there, it would not have been a good day for Adam Schiff. He's a national disgrace and a danger to the nation. Katie Porter and Barbara Lee are quote-unquote progressives, which in this day and age means Marxist, frankly. And I'm the proud Trump supporter in this race. I can walk it and talk it. That's why I'm getting great support from grassroots all around our state. I've gotten more support from California Republican organizations around our state than any other candidate in this race. And that's why it was really a shame that they didn't let me on those debate stages. But I am by far the strongest candidate in this race, and if folks want a change in this state, if your listeners want to change in this state, and anybody with common sense knows that this state is going down, and it's largely because of this one-party rule we've been under in California for over 2 decades. I am the change agent in this race, and so I'm asking for your listeners' votes. The voting is going on right now. The primary is March 5th. Vote for Eric Early.
On the air live with Eric Early, Republican candidate for the California U.S. Senate seat. And on the flip side, I recently moderated a debate where we had nearly a dozen candidates vying for the LA County District Attorney's seat. So it's a mystery why these other organizations could not include a larger field of candidates in the U.S. Senate race. That should be noted. And since law and order is such a big issue here.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I'm not saying put 25 people on the stage, but they could have gone to 5 people. But there's a reason why they didn't want to hear my voice on that stage, and I think a lot of your listeners are hearing why right now.
Appreciate that, and certainly we want to get the word out about what happened there, and certainly on the law and order issue, which is a big issue. Obviously, with crime and homelessness, very big issues here in the Los Angeles area. How would you tackle the crime situation at a national level here at this point?
Listen, crime is largely a state-related issue, but to the extent we can get funding for our great law enforcement up and down the state, I would be doing that. But I would also be going all around the state talking to all California voters and saying, we have to get more Republicans in our state legislature right now because it is completely under control by the far-left Democrats, and every single one of these pro-criminal policies is being negotiated, drafted, and passed by this far left. We need more Republicans in our state assembly as well. As far as homelessness, even though that is largely a state issue as well, I'm running for, federal U.S. Senate in Washington. I've been saying this for years. We've got hundreds of thousands of acres of great vacant state and federal lands, and we should be building at much less of a cost than this Newsom has wasted over the years, billions. We could build high-end military-style tent encampments with all the utilities, etc. For the largest majority of the homeless that are severely mentally ill, I'd say at least 70% of them severely mentally ill, put them to tent encampments that also have health care services set up. They get the health care they need, have security up there, etc., have food. For those with the drug addictions, send them to, again, these military-style setups with military care. And for the very limited number of the homeless who don't have those issues, who really can't, who just can't afford to pay for these housing rates, those are the ones that we look at for low-income housing. But the homelessness issue is way more than just a need for more housing, which is what the rulers of our state have been lying to the public about for decades now.
On the air live with Eric Early, candidate for California U.S. Senate, and President Trump has said if he is reelected that there would be mass deportations. You've seen these horrific videos of recent arrivals attacking the police and so forth. What about the border situation and how you would address that?
Frank, we got to do whatever we can. We have to stop the invasion, start building the wall again, get back in place the policies that Trump had, the Remain in Mexico policy, etc. As I said a little bit earlier, to the extent necessary, we have to look seriously at sending our military to the border to stop this invasion, and then we have to start looking at...
All right, we are going to try to restore our connection here. We wish Eric Early all the best, the Republican candidate for the California U.S. Senate seat. Thank you very much for joining us live here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Good afternoon. We're kicking off the new week here, doing it live in the 4 o'clock hour. Mottek On Money, weekdays at 4 o'clock. 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide on the app, and also, of course, KABC.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Taking a closer look now at commercial real estate. It turns out commercial real estate foreclosures nationwide are up 97% compared to a year ago. This is when, about a year ago, is when the issue came up with 3 bank failures. And looks like commercial real estate foreclosures up 17% just last month. Is the bottom in commercial real estate in Los Angeles? According to one report today, for investors waiting until the price of office buildings in L.A. drops to bedrock, the time might have arrived. A recent smattering of sales points to a new price floor for office buildings in the market. This according to The Real Deal. Let's bring in one of the top folks at The Real Deal, a longtime contributor to this program, Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Director of The Real Deal, Commercial Real Estate News, former editor of the Orange County Business Journal and the Los Angeles Business Journal. Jerry, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon. Jerry, take it from the top and tell us, is the bottom in commercial real estate here?
I think so, and I think the story we have today, our West Coast Bureau Chief, Isabella Farr, did a lot of reporting and wrote a very sharp piece indicating that I think more or less LA's office market has found a bottom. It looks like it's, in downtown Glendale, those sorts of markets, I think it's around 135 per square foot on Class A office, and on West Side it maybe ranges up, maybe up as high as 300. But I think at least there's a floor from which investors can now work. There's been a spate of recent deals that gave just enough comps to get things rolling, and I think not everybody's in. I don't think institutional money's in yet, but local entrepreneurs, family office, people who know the local market very well, I think they're starting to say, yeah, now's the time to bargain hunt.
Is LA holding up better than other parts of the country? New York, for example?
No, I don't think LA is doing better. I just think that they have at least arrived at the bottom. So, it's a lot of bad news. And I guess, if you want to find some good news in it all, it's okay. It looks as though they've found bottom. Now begins the work of, trying to get your feet underneath you, take advantage of the floor and try and get the market first stabilized, and then, you hope lift it. But, it's still very rough. And I think probably fewer signs of anything that might kind of give a jolt of positive energy or absorption in the market in LA right now. But, who knows where that might come from. You got to start somewhere. You start with the floor. And I think the point now is, okay, at least that seems to have been established.
On there live with Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Director of The Real Deal, commercial real estate news site, authoritative site on commercial real estate nationwide, and, of course, a big presence here in the Los Angeles area. Of course, that slow return to the office, a big reason why we've seen these office towers in trouble these days. Jerry, what about that? Are people starting to come back to occupy these places?
I believe that is happening finally. I think faster in some places, slower in others. Some places, Texas, Florida, never shut down to the degree that New York or California did. And so, that's a mixed bag. I'm not sure. The readings that you'll see, maybe not in terms of some of the data coming out. I check, just look at the buses or the trains or the transit areas, or in LA, the freeways, probably your best indicator. And what's traffic like, and does it feel like people are coming back in and out every day? And, you'll get a sense of it.
All right. And what about that big eyesore now in the heart of downtown Los Angeles? And this is something that we've been talking about for years. It just recently got attention now that it's been covered with graffiti, that ocean-wide project there, the Chinese bankrupt project right across from Crypto.com Arena, formerly Staples Center, and not finished and now filled with graffiti. What do you think is going to happen with that?
Well, it's very difficult because that project right now, there's so much sunk cost into it. I think it's near $2 billion sunk cost. It's about, I don't know, it was at one point about 3/4 or even a little more done. But, that deteriorates. There's been no work done on it for 4 years. And give yourself some credit, Frank. You have been talking about this for years. It seems as though the LA City Council just discovered it.
Right.
So I don't know. And they can bill, they can clean up the graffiti and bill ocean-wide all they want. Getting paid is another thing. I don't know what world they're living in. But, it won't be that simple. Ocean-wide is in China and bankrupt. But the sense of there's not a lot of sense of the project right now. So it's really a concerning thing. You have this massive project. It's like a broken tooth in the middle of your downtown skyline. And, I've talked to people who say, you'd almost have to pay someone to take it.
Yeah, and might it be based on your reporting with the experts in commercial real estate and indeed construction, when you have a building sitting open like that for almost 5 years now, obviously mold and obviously a lot of considerations. Now, you think it might have to be ultimately torn down and something else put up there?
Geez, that would be an awfully big demolition and an awful lot of sunk cost to take.
It certainly would be big, but we're going to continue the conversation. Jerry Sullivan, thank you very much for joining us live here. That is Jerry Sullivan, Managing Director of the commercial real estate news site, The Real Deal. Thank you very much, Jerry, and we'll continue to follow Oceanwide as well as the other big news on commercial real estate with your reporting. That is Jerry Sullivan with The Real Deal, and well known here in Southern California as former editor of the Orange County Business Journal and the Los Angeles Business Journal, live with us here this afternoon on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Interesting story coming out of Fortune today regarding commercial real estate. They're reporting that as remote work keeps employees out of the office and vacancy rates sit at all-time highs, commercial property owners are desperately trying to avoid default by upgrading their spaces to attract new tenants, converting their space into apartments, or simply offloading their assets. One longtime industry professional doesn't think that will be enough, though. Fred Cordova, for example, of Santa Monica-based Corian Enterprises, says there won't be room for everyone, and about a third of office buildings are endangered species at this point. He's telling Fortune there will be a bifurcation. The product in a good location with a good, safe environment will recover. And then you have another group that will somehow hang in there and get reset in pricing. Jerry, what are your thoughts here? Certainly it's a tale of two areas here. For example, downtown compared to Century City, which is doing quite well and still almost 100% occupancy rate. So depending on where you look, there are some bright spots here.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And Century City, yeah, you put your thumb on a real bright spot. And, certain Class A offices, a lot of amenities, right place, are continuing to do well. And but they are the outliers. The better stuff, the more positive picture in LA right now is the outlier, and the general condition is really rugged.
Jerry, thanks for coming back to the line here, and we want to formally thank you again for doing the great job on all commercial real estate stories here, and we'll continue to follow all of this with you and look forward to speaking with you again very, very soon. Thank you very much for the call this afternoon.
Okay, Frank, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, and stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and tune in again tomorrow afternoon at 4 for Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
The Ed Milet Show showcases the greatest peak performers sharing their journey, knowledge, and thought leadership.
This is one of the all-time best pieces of advice ever given on the show.
Author and coach Tony Robbins.
You don't experience life. You experience the life you focus on.
Singer Jason Derulo.
My happiest moments have always been in the grind.
Singer Jewel.
I think healing is a gritty job. It's you looking in the mirror and going, what do I got? No one's coming for me. I'm coming for me.
The Ed Milet Show is available on YouTube or wherever you listen.